Welcome friends to another Dune video. Today we'll look at the planet Ecaz and pay attention to the plants that grow there like Sappho and Fogwood. When the fief fell into the hands of House Plana, research was carried out into the plants that grew there, but a rebellion from House Plana ended when atomics were dropped on them in 7033 BG. The weapons used were diggers, intended to blast out deep, strong points, causing radioactive byproducts so substantial as to render the entire planet uninhabitable. But more important than the radiation was the breaching of the formerly sealed botanical research and development stations, releasing the mutagenic bacteria, viruses and chemicals into the atmosphere. For centuries, only the taller mountain peaks and the polar ice caps could be safely visited. Now from this incident, plant life unique to Ecaz developed. Visitors to it were rotated on the planet, and outsiders would scoff at the reputation of the odd planets that grew there, until they found their glass etched by acid mould, their metal devoured by rust root whenever it was left in contact with the ground for more than 5 minutes, and their plastics dissolved and leached away by any of a dozen or more surprisingly active and very deadly mere plants. So it was a harsh lesson for anyone visiting there to learn. At this time, the only animals on the planet are insects. The others were wiped out in the earlier disaster. Fogwood is one of those unusual developments that arose after the incident. When it is exposed to human minds over a considerable period of time, the adaptive phloem in the outer layer of the fogwood trunk will intrude and warp, precisely reacting to the thoughts of people there. We see a member of House Ecaz in Paul of Dune, for example, has used this to create a fortress from the tree trunks. When refined, the wood assumes a form which arouses the thoughts in the viewer, similar to those of the sculptor. Now, a very good sculpture can bring out associated reactions to fit what has been made, such as sights and sounds and smells. When a Fogwood sculptor has decided on a subject, he travels to the surface of Ecaz and selects a suitable tree, which he registers with the Sculptors Guild in order to prevent mental contamination of his work. For his own protection, the sculptor then places a dome around the tree and stays within a few meters of his work, thinking about what he wants it to look like. This is not as simple as it sounds, since the sculptor must think as much as possible only of the topic he wishes to sculpt, not when he's going to sleep, not what meals he's having that evening, not where he will be dining with a beautiful man or woman, but the sculpture itself, forming it with his mind. One significant sculpture was made of the Padisha Emperor, Shaddam IV, and for years people would visit it in remembrance of him. Another was titled Fear. This is the only example of naturally occurring fogwood sculpture ever discovered. An entire stand of trees was located in 8444 at the site of a fatal landing shuttle crash. The fogwood trees at the site faithfully recorded the unremitting terror of the crew and passengers, making them not only the sole example of group production of a fogwood sculpture, but also the most unsettling sculpture ever done. Elaca wood is another unique growth on Ecaz, which led to the discovery of the Elaca drug. Members of the Voin expedition camped in a stand of Elaca and used some of the dried stalks for a campfire. When expedition members noticed that they were developing an unusual orange-red flush, their first reaction would have been absolute panic. They were astonished to realise that they had no craving for the safety of the shuttle and the base's medics. Instead, an utter disregard for their own well-being gripped them. This abandon puzzled the members of the expedition, but only theoretically. For the first time since landing on Ecaz, they were unworried that they might not get off the planet, but the scientists did not appreciate the danger of their state until an insect landed on the entomologist's arm. He calmly waited for it to bore a hole so he could determine its effects on human physiology. And when the effects of this drug had worn off, several of them had died, but they learned what Elaca could do, and it would be employed to bring bravery to slaves in the arenas, say the fighting Fade Routher, for example, or with suicide assassins. Another use, when a lacquer is burned to ash, it gives a feeling of a peaceful mind to someone, increases their well-being. Sappho is also found on Ecaz. It's taken from roots near where ancient atomic ground had been blasted by radiation and had fused the soil. Supplies of this are limited. Most users of Sappho are mentats, for whom the drug is a mental amplifier. Experiments with untrained subjects reveal no corresponding amplification of mentat-like abilities. And then there is another plant called Verta, which comes from truth trees. And in line with that name, it makes you tell the truth, and it's used in interrogations. Perhaps a major house is trying to find out information from a minor house and has captured one of their lowly servants, for example. And lastly, we have to mention the microorganisms of Ecaz, one of which is used in the manufacture of glow globes. And with that fun trivia on Ecaz, I will end today's video.